Thank
issue
you.
of invasive species came to us from our lake associations in the last couple of years. And quite honestly, initially, I would say we weren't paying as much attention as we should have been. And but through different presentations from the Invasive Species Council and the New Brunswick Alliance of Lake Associations, uh, we just became more aware of how critical this issue is for our community from an environmental and an economic development point of view. So we have taken some actions and we're starting down the road, and I'll stop with that and turn over to Sean Hawley, our CAO, who will give you a little bit of background and then introduce Sarah and Jennifer from the New Brunswick Invasive Species Council.
Thanks, Director Corey, Mayor Corey. Great to see everyone here today virtually, and thank you, as the mayor and director mentioned. My name is Sean Hawley. I'm the CEO for Harvey Roll Community, and thanks again for having us join and speaking to the committee. And we're proud to partner with NB Invasive Species Council. You'll see us refer to interchange with NBIC, ISC, for those unfamiliar. As mentioned, both Jennifer and Sarah are here, and we're going to turn it right over to them here in a second. But we did want to talk to the committee and sort of reinforce this is what we view as a regional economic issue, where invasive species become an area of opportunity for us to address, not only with our waterways, but with our local economy and economies. Harvey, as many of you know, here in the capital region is a home of multiple lakes, rivers, and streams, and most of the region is connected by the St. John River, which is part of our community as well. This is important because it supports fishing, boating, snowmobiling, swimming, tourism, to name a few, and a number of our residents along the waterways, which is extremely important to our economy. It's a way of life here in the capital region. And I know, just looking at who's on, I don't have to say that twice here to the group. We did speak with our residents, as the mayor mentioned, here in the community. Most recently, we did a recreation needs analysis as an offshoot of a strategic plan, and lake health and access to waterways was a top community priority. And there was very strong sentiment in our community focus groups and discussions around a public desire for protection and strong environmental stewardship because of the importance of these assets in the community. And because of the risks that we're facing today, early action is critical. And you're going to hear from Jennifer and Sarah how important this is. Prevention is a fraction of the cost once there is an invasive species present in a body of water, and it's almost impossible to remove. This impacts municipal costs, property values, tourism, and recreation. And unlike wine, it doesn't age well. So the longer it goes, the worse it gets. And this becomes a real nuisance and problem for us. Harvey specifically, we're focused in partnership with the Invasive Species Council and our various lake associations. We're getting ready to begin the journey around local waterway usage strategy plan. And it spans these four areas around prevention education through to how we harness volunteers for monitoring. And at the center of it, we want to keep inclusive access for all of our residents and avoid some NIMBY behaviors that can come along without the proper education and prevention strategies so that our residents and tourists can use the waterways and take advantage of the great beauty our community has to offer. Again, for the committee, why regional action matters. We think we're stronger together. A coordinated response is needed, and it's one of the strengths of the Service Commission and the regional approach we have here in the capital region. Property values, tourism, tax base, just to name a few, are key, near and dear to all of us in our communities. And here, environments is something we all aspire to protect and to steward it. And it goes hand in hand in this case with economic development, which is important to the sustainability and viabilities of our community, and that the two work in harmony with the right approach and the right strategies. So the ask, as I turn it over to our partners with Jennifer and Sarah, is that the committee carry this forward to the board to advocate for a regional strategy and shared resources, and that the committee help us protect our natural assets before it's too late, because time is of the essence, as we mentioned. So with that, thanks Jennifer and Sarah for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you, and I'll stop sharing here so you can pull up the rest of the presentation.
Jen, you can start talking while I go ahead and try to just
Okay.
share my screen.
Thank you.
So
Yes,
you may want to introduce yourselves again.
I will. Yeah, thank you, Sean and Mayor Corey, and the committee for the invitation to speak today. I'm Jennifer Yamazaki, the council supervisor with the NBISC, and Sarah Cusack is my colleague. She's our aquatics coordinator, and we're excited to be here today. So thank you. Thank you for inviting us. Yeah, excited to get started about this regional approach and conversation. Just a little bit about the New Brunswick Invasive Species Council, NBISC, I'll just call it from here on out. So we are a nonprofit, non-regulatory organization. We started in 2012 as a very small volunteer group founded by a couple of different NGOs, and later became the provincial chapter of the Canadian Council on Invasive Species, which is now Invasives Canada. We are not a government agency. We don't enforce any kind of laws or regulations, but instead we work to fill gaps where no single government department may have clear ownership of aquatic invasive species prevention and management. And just to note too, we're talking today about aquatic invasive species, even though there are lots of terrestrial and forest pests, etc. But today we're focusing on aquatic invasive species. So our work is primarily funded through grants, project-based grants with a small amount of core funding. But despite being a small team, right now there's 4 paid staff. We do play a big province-wide role. So especially as communities increasingly face issues like Eurasian water milfoil and the risk of zebra mussels entering our waters. So some of the things we do, we train local volunteers, lake associations, municipalities, and how to identify aquatic invasive species, report them, and follow best practices. We provide tools and resources and outreach materials, information sessions, and we act as a convener. So we bring together federal, provincial, municipal, and community partners to align our efforts and share data. And we support municipalities and local groups with expertise and when they want to take local action, like installing signage or setting up monitoring programs. So aquatic invasive species, it's a challenge that no group can tackle alone. They don't recognize municipal or regional boundaries, and they spread wherever water flows and wherever people travel. So over the next few slides, we'll look at how they spread and then the real risks they pose to our communities and local economies. And then this will help us start thinking about what kind of coordinated response, shared leadership is needed to protect our waters. So I'll pass the next one over to Sarah.
Okay, so first and foremost, just to give you a background, because we want to all start from the same launching point, is how aquatic invasive species spread. Most aquatic invasive species are actually introduced to new areas by human activity. It's not a natural spread that happens. It's a natural spread that happens once it's introduced to an area. A lot of our water bodies aren't connected, especially in the sense of a lake. So that invasive species, whatever it is, typically it's a plant or an animal, is moved by boats, jet skis, kayaks, paddling gear, fishing equipment. We're talking anything that goes in and out of the water on a regular basis, that the regular general public or different group could move from one area to the other. Another way is dumping aquarium or water garden plants into new areas when they're unwanted. The typical one that you think about would be goldfish into the community pond. That ends up prolifically spreading throughout that pond and changing that ecosystem. So if you think of that being introduced into a lake, it can outcompete all the other native species as well. And the charismatic ones that we think about when we think about species spread here in New Brunswick is Eurasian water milfoil, as that picture is shown there. That guy is taking it off of his trailer and boat, and then also zebra mussel right now. So that's what makes prevention through education and outreach key because we want to stop species from being moved unintentionally or unknowing. We want everyone to know that this is how things are spreading. So Jen.
So why this matters to our region? So here in New Brunswick, our lakes and rivers are more than just scenic backdrops. They're central to our way of life. They support recreation, tourism, community well-being, and they're also a foundation for local economies, especially in some rural areas. So New Brunswick's tourism economy depends heavily on clean, accessible waterways. When invasive species like Eurasian water milfoil take hold, they form dense mats and block boat launches, make swimming unpleasant or not even possible, and can interfere with fishing. This can drive both residents and tourists away from lakes they once enjoyed, also impacting rentals, outfitters, and local businesses. In other jurisdictions, some infestations have resulted in sharp declines in lake use and directly impacting seasonal businesses. Maine has seen this firsthand and invested heavily in prevention programs, which we'll talk about a little bit later, directly tied because the healthy lakes are directly tied to their tourism economy. And the picture here, taken in 2016 by Dr. Megan Bruce of Canadian Rivers Institute. This was a great swimming hole near Island View below the Mactaquac Dam. And within a few years, which is a relatively short time, you can see the Eurasian water milfoil forming the dense mats and also can create ideal conditions for algae to grow as well. So for community well-being, again, like lakes are central to the identity and lifestyle of many New Brunswick communities. When invasive species take over, they don't just reduce access, but they can also create stress and conflict within communities. So homeowners worry about property values. Lake associations get overwhelmed with tasks and have limited resources, and volunteers can burn out fighting a problem that they feel can be powerless to stop. So it's not just an environmental issue, it's a community health and resilience issue. Once they take hold, municipalities face rising costs, such as weed harvesting to keep beaches and boat launches clear, infrastructure maintenance as plants and mussels can clog culverts, docks, and water intake. So they're generally unplanned expenses that can strain what might already be a tight municipal budget. We'll talk a little bit more about the high cost of management when we look at the invasive curve in just a short time, but the message is simple, that prevention costs far less than dealing with a full infestation later on. And to understand why this matters so much, Sarah will highlight areas where they've already taken hold and what that means for lakes if we don't act quickly.
Okay. Just trying to go to the next slide, but it will not let me here. Okay. So Jen just highlighted an actual example that's really close to our home base in Fredericton. However, this is widespread across the province. As I mentioned, and as Jen mentioned, we have so many different water bodies that are either connected or disconnected. And many aquatic invasive species have already been introduced to these areas. Eurasian water milfoil is up and down the Woolastook-St. John River and has been found in some of the lakes that connect to it. So Harts Lake down in the Gagetown area, that's pretty prevalent there. And then also in Grand Lake as well, in a more or less disconnected system, Darlings Lake area out in Hampton, the Widgewack area. So they are spreading and they are being introduced to these areas and they are connected. So that is helping with their spread. But there are many other aquatic invasive species on the horizon in native or neighboring Maine, Quebec, Ontario, not so much from PEI. However, all of these places are connected to us and folks come here because of our tourism and because of our recreation values and we've kind of been just a drive-through province for a long period of time, but I think COVID shifted folks' mindset and now there is a heavy focus on bringing tourism or increasing tourism in our region, and with that comes the risk of every single other type of invasive species that could be introduced to the our ecosystems. This map right in the center just shows it's mainly focused on fishing tournament boat launch locations and where folks are traveling from to and from to get to these areas. So we have a lot of folks coming from Quebec and Ontario because our fishery has been so lucrative, especially with bass. We also have folks coming from Nova Scotia, PEI, that may be bringing something home from us that we don't want. We don't want them to take home. Invasive species from New Brunswick, and then also neighboring Maine. So there are many different vectors and pathways for these invasive species to enter an ecosystem. These are just the targeted groups that we see, and then we actually have been going out doing clean drain dry practices and doing invasive species monitoring with these groups. But these are just groups that we know of. There's not anything in place currently, which Jen will get into on the folks that are coming as tourists to these areas and using our lakes and rivers and bringing their boats from away. So there's constantly a risk of introduction from multiple different avenues. And we're seeing as this picture on the right of Dr. Meg Bruce, again, that is also on the main stem of the Woolastook St. John. That has slowed down the ecosystem. That has changed the habitat there for fish, which is an avenue of tourism, recreational fishing. That changes that habitat, which we can see based on elsewhere and what we've observed here so far, that there are great impacts that come with an invasive species introduction. They may not be immediate, but they are long-term. So we're just hammering home that prevention is our number one tool. But of course, that comes with different problems and things that we need to consider to be able to be so proactive that we're covering all the different avenues. So I'll pass it back over to Jen. Oh, no, it's not Jen's turn. It's mine again. So this is the invasion curve that Jen was mentioning earlier. And it really just gives a visual when you're comparing on the left.
Last year somewhere.
On the left is the area infested, so the total area covered by the invasive species that's been introduced. On the bottom axis there, it's time. So over time, things get worse. And then, of course, on the opposite axis is control costs. So the costs associated with managing a species once it's been introduced. And the first star down at the bottom of the page there, or bottom of the slide, is probably where the species has been introduced. Detection happens later, and it happens later and later depending on how much monitoring is going on. So the longer you wait, eradication becomes harder and harder, and the management costs increase. In the middle range there, you have some feasibility with having eradication. Maybe there's only a few pockets of this species established, if we're talking about plants, that you could work with a group such as ourselves or another management group to help eradicate that. But it's important to note that like public awareness typically begins way after the fact. When people start noticing the impacts of that invasive species, or they start noticing changes to what they regularly enjoy. And also, after detection, it takes a while to get that message out, typically, especially without the proper channels. So as you get further and further to the right of that curve, you're basically only managing to maintain the system, if that, or you're having to make some really hard decisions on what you're managing for. Are you managing for the ecosystem? Are you managing so that people can still back their boats into the water and go for a boat ride? Are you managing for swimming? It gets more and more expensive and harder to do something about as things go along. So that's why it's really important to try to, as much as we can, stick to the left-hand side of the curve with the prevention, the monitoring, investing some money and making sure that we're on the lookout constantly. And we're making sure that people who are bringing their boats here or enjoying things here are aware of the risks and how to mitigate them. This is true across terrestrial species, so trees, plants, forest pests, all that stuff. But of course, we're focusing on aquatic invasive species. So it's really easy to pinpoint like the boats, the people that are bringing the things on the boats, that type of thing. So I will pass it over to Jen.
Thank you. Yeah, so as prevention, what others are doing in other jurisdictions. So just want to talk a little bit, look beyond our borders to see what other provinces and states are doing to prevent aquatic invasive species spread. So we can kind of see both inspiration and gaps that we may need to close. In Maine, so they passed a plant transport ban. So make it illegal to move aquatic plants on boats or trailers. So this helps stop invasive species from moving between water bodies. They also have a strong program. It's called a courtesy boat inspection, or CBI program, directed by the Department of Environmental Protection, where they provide core funding to lake associations and other groups, and some are paid positions, some are volunteers, but basically they empower those to go to launch sites and then do actual courtesy boat inspections and inspect trailers and gear, and then remove plants or other hitchhiking organisms before the boats enter or leave lakes. So these steps have helped keep Maine free of zebra mussels while also reducing the spread of plants like Eurasian water milfoil. And so their model combines the law with inspection, community participation, and basically leading to much better outcomes. Ontario has passed the Invasive Species Act, which explicitly treats watercraft as a carrier of invasive species. And that means that boats themselves are regulated. So under Ontario regulations, and boaters must clean, drain, dry, remove drain plugs when moving watercraft over land. And conservation officers have authority to stop and inspect. There's also mandatory decontamination sites in certain areas and strong public outreach programs to support compliance. In British Columbia, they've gone a little further in enforcing roadside boat inspections, and they have mandatory inspection stations on major transportation routes with powers to detain and decontaminate boats ID'd with invasive species. They can also impose fines for noncompliance, ensuring that there's consequences that don't just make suggestions, but or voluntary messaging. And they've also invested in economic assessments showing how expensive it can become when invasive species establish. So that kind of helps justify the cost of prevention programs to taxpayers and to government. In New Brunswick, by contrast, so New Brunswick currently does not have provincial legislation specifically requiring boat inspections, or no law mandating clean, drain, dry, and no powers to issue fines or detain watercraft for aquatic invasive species compliance. So most prevention here is voluntarily led by MBAIC, lake associations, other NGOs, local volunteers, and then from the provincial and federal departments, especially with, for like providing boat wash stations. And then we have public outreach and awareness campaigns, of course, which Clean Drain Dry is a pretty extensive one. Water Watchers, which Sarah will talk a little bit about, but no legal mandate. And again, our funding is mostly project-based, meaning we don't have, we often have to wait for grants, but what we do lack a bit is the stable, dedicated funding streams to, for more prevention and inspection. And Sarah, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, so what can we do now? This is more or less what we have been doing for a while, but what we can do in our capacity right now is install signage at all boat launches. In this picture here on the top, we have multiple signs put in there. There's one by the province and two by ourselves about clean, drain, dry, what it means to do that, where you should be looking on your boat. This could be at motorized and non-motorized boat launches, public parks, etc. Then heavily focusing on that education and outreach. So we do a lot of that. We have groups actually this past year with the increase of zebra mussel knowledge in the community, having groups reach out to us to do more educational presentations, training on identification, training on the steps, how you can clean, drain, dry. We have lots of different pamphlets that we give out to our partner groups, Harvey Lake Association, the New Brunswick Alliance of Lake Associations, all the other lake associations. We try to get our materials out into the community as much as possible because, as Jen's mentioned, it's 4 of us working full time, also battling the threat of terrestrial invasive species and forest pests. So we are spread quite thin. However, we try to make sure that we're strategizing where we are reaching out to do this education so we can have the largest impact. Another thing that groups like yourselves can do in partnership with us and other groups is use social media as a tool. Everyone is on Facebook nowadays, or most are. So sharing and being really repetitive with our messaging, clean, drain, dry, like saying that to somebody may not leave a lasting impact, but if they're constantly hearing that word, that string of 3 words together, and then they're starting to understand it more, or they're knowing more about what an invasive species does to an ecosystem, that is going to create a mind shift. We're continually doing that. That's our mandate, but always more can be done. The next thing is like supporting community science programs. Ourselves, we have what we're calling water watchers, which includes training opportunities for different municipal groups or watershed groups or community groups that are interested in training and learning more about how to identify an invasive species. Water Watchers is meant to be an inclusive, accessible program where we go out with groups, do a plant paddle, which is like bringing your canoe or kayak and us joining you out on the water. We did one on Lake George this past summer, where we brought people together to go out, paddle, pull up what we saw, native or invasive. There's no invasives, just as a heads up for everyone, but pulling up native species so that people can actually understand what is underneath the water so that they know what to be looking for when something looks different. In Eurasian water milfoil, it does have a lot of native counterparts. There are lots of species of milfoil in the province. However, Eurasian water milfoil is pretty distinctive. And once it's introduced to a system, as we've reiterated multiple times in this, it has consequential impacts. So Water Watchers is meant to be an educational tool that empowers folks to be able to do the monitoring. Another thing that we can do is talk to one another. So share data and coordinate with neighboring communities. Maybe there's a possibility that the municipalities can coordinate a day of we're going to go out on the lake and we're going to paddle around and see what we find. That could be volunteer-based, that could be incentivized somehow, but talking to one another and letting each other know what's going on is very empowering because oh, Harvey Lake has this. Maybe we should be looking here for Lake George, or Ormocto Lake, etc. in the Grand Lake region, those things. And then also exploring partnerships based on your communications to strengthen the prevention and response. That's all. I'm pretty much sure that this is the reason why we're here today, and this is why Harvey brought this to discussion. But exploring what little or big partnerships are able to happen, whether that's we all get signage for our lakes together, or we're looking at where we can strategically put a boat wash station, or how are we going to man a current boat wash station that is available, or with our firefighter department, could we just add some sort of pressure washer system to the side and work with different groups that way? These are many, many different options. Some I haven't even talked about yet, but those are different options that we have available to us or could explore further and strengthen over time. I will pass it back over to Jen.
Thank you, Sarah. Working together. So yeah, it's a shared challenge. Invasive species don't recognize municipal or regional boundaries, so they spread wherever water flows and wherever people are moving boats and equipment. So that's why no single municipality, watershed group, or organization can solve this problem alone. So it takes collaboration across communities. Here in New Brunswick, we still have an opportunity to act. Eurasian water milfoil, as we've already said, well established in parts of the St. John Willistook River, while other species like zebra mussels are well established right across our borders, but only recently ID'd in New Brunswick. So many lakes remain free of invasive species, and early action can delay or prevent spread, saving communities significant headaches and costs. So, boat launches, beaches, the municipalities are really at the front line of defense with boat launches, beaches, public access points, and where these invasive species most often appear. Installing signage, promoting clean, drain, dry, and supporting monitoring programs can make a visible difference in protecting our local waterways. MBIC plays a supportive role, as we've been saying. We provide resources, the signage templates, and training for municipalities and volunteers, and connect local efforts with provincial and federal partners so no one is working in isolation. So by working together regionally, we can slow the spread now while also building a strong, united voice for the future. And this collective action can lay the groundwork for stronger provincial leadership and long-term solutions to protect New Brunswick's lakes and rivers. And I think I'll leave it open here then for any questions. And thank you. Thank you for listening.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Being the mayor of the municipality of Grand Lake, it's always of a concern to us with having the this side of the lake anyway, being so big and attached to the St. John River, and we always have boats from everywhere in there, and it's certainly a concern for us. So, is there any questions? I really can't see with the presentation
I
up.
can stop sharing my screen. We get
There you go. That will help me.
Oh, there we go.
Great. Is there any questions? Yes.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, please, Councilor Erickson or Director Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much for the presentation. I should confess, I feel like I'm cheating a bit because this is the second time I've seen it. So I've been working on my questions since the last time that we had this conversation in Fredericton Council chambers. Nonetheless, I've got a different set of questions now. Last time I bugged you about why we weren't attacking this with CRISPR, and it seems like going after the mosquitoes and going after zebra mussels are similar. I Googled that during the meeting last time, and there was 1 or 2 hits about CRISPR stuff. I just did it now, and there's 30. So it's happening. It's just happening in centers that can afford CRISPR and DNA technology and stuff. Inside your presentation, I heard a short list of things that we need to advocate towards the province for, and that's my question. Can we get a very succinct list of things that we can, as partners in this issue, badger the province for to help you? And I'm talking legislative tools that you noted were absent but present in other provinces and some of the other things. Because that, aside from being a conduit to our residents and their ability to participate in these preventative programs, is the other big thing we can do for you and do for this issue. And I'll just leave it at that. But sometime in the future, if that could be sent along to the Service Commission and or the member municipalities, that would be fantastic. We advocate to the province and the feds all the time. And they look to us to make things cheaper by spending in the present instead of in the future. But we have to make the case strongly because of all their spending priorities. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any further questions?
Question, Paul. I'm Paul Mene from Arcadia, Ward 2, which has Harts Lake. I wasn't aware that we actually had Eurasian water milfoil in that lake. We do have a municipally owned boat launch that we're looking at refurbishing, adding some more parking, maybe some facilities, and accessibility for disabled boaters, but also a boat wash station. And I'm curious if you have any advice on the best way to approach a boat wash facility that would, obviously you wouldn't be able to man it. It would have to be used by whoever's using the water.
Yeah, so I can speak to that really quickly, Jen, if you'd like. Okay, so we've worked with a group in the past, and there are multiple groups they specialize in these clean, drain, dry systems per se. There is one local in New Brunswick, which is Easy Clean. They do a lot of high commercial production for different things. And then there's a specialized group in Quebec called Ozero Solutions. Ozero would, I know for sure, be able to produce something that is self-serviceable. But it might not be a bad idea to explore other options. Just we know that that's quite costly going with Ozero as like a small municipality. However, what you're looking for is hot water and high pressure. Those are your two key things that you want so that you can decontaminate for removing plants off of boats, but then the hot water is killing anything that you're not necessarily able to see. So also if you know somebody who is really efficient at putting things together, those are your two key things that you need to look for.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any further questions?
Chairperson Nickel, can you hear me? It's Bobby Hart.
Yes, I can hear you.
My comment question, it's more of a comment than a question, but I think you've probably covered it in a lot of your slides. Thanks for the presentation, by the way. I'm a member of the New Brunswick Lake Association in my other role as the Paltoma Lake crowd, and also I'm from the municipality of Frank Junction, which is surrounded by waterways. And recently we had a visit from Fredericton Tourism, and Capital Tourism, and I'm assuming all of this is being vetted through Capital Regions Service Commission as well. But we were brought up to speed on all the statistics stuff and how we're growing since COVID times with people visiting and that sort of thing. And I just would like to see some of this incorporated in their statistical information that they're sharing with municipalities, because I agree with you that I don't feel that this is being the Life Well Crafted is being publicized really well, but I don't think this little key piece is being emphasized as much as it should be. And that's just my comment. I'm sure you're already working with them, but I just know from my own personal experience, I'd just like to see more communication as well.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Yes, Director Smith.
First off, thank you both, and thank you to CAO Holly and Director Corey for suggesting this and raising this, and for the other communities. And Jennifer, you and Sarah, thank you. It was a great presentation. Just wondering, this is my old hat of working in GNB. With the reason being with the absence of a legislative policy or legislation around it in the province, when you speak to the province, they talk to you that this is a federal regulated matter. But the other side of that coin is it really affects us all. It affects everybody. There's got to be a balance there somewhere, and how do we work together and how do we partner on things like that? So just wondering, in your presentation, is that kind of the reason, or is that a sense you get, or is it if we say it and we do something about it, then we have to action it? I'm just not sure what the absence is on that. And if you don't want to answer, that's okay too. But I'm just looking for a little speculation maybe on that. That's all.
I guess my understanding, if it's, it could be federally regulated, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that body is able or, to kind of do the on the ground enforcement necessarily. So it really is a full approach, I think, with federal, provincial, and then, all encompassing, to be honest. My understanding is they can make the regulations, but it's not necessarily that they're also just the ones that are going to do the enforcing.
I do have a comment as well, is that, I live on the lake and I see every day people backing their boats in and out of their camps and cottages and residents as well. And then there's also, we have maybe 8 boat launch areas throughout the just this side on my side of the lake. And there is no wash stations there, or hot water pressure. And And that if you ask the municipality to put in 8 different wash stations at all these, I'm sure they're going to say no due to the cost. And that I think the only way that we're going to get this done is if we stand, in some way united, but have a specific ask. What is the ask that we're looking for? Is it to have a wash station at every site? Is it to mandate only boat launch areas approved? Is it to how do we regulate this and how do we get it on the radar of the province and the feds and then and move forward? So I guess when I listen to your presentation, I'm quite concerned basically because I'm surrounded by a Grand Lake. It's, 25 miles long. It's a big lake. And my concern is how do you regulate it? Who's going to enforce it? When JPS were out in the boats talking to people about backing their Sea-Doo in, or I must have took 50 calls that weekend on we've done this forever. What's going on? How come? And so without a great program out front, it's going to be a hard pressed push. So I think that we really do have to formulate what the ask is and are we going from a Model T to a Cadillac today? Or are we going from a Model T to a Volkswagen? Not to say there's anything wrong with the Volkswagen, but I'm just saying.
And
Uh,
I really think I'll just speak to that just for a second. I really think that that's where we can look to what other jurisdictions have done. BC was proactive in the 80s when zebra mussel were introduced into the Great Lakes. They were like, we have this beautiful country, we want to keep it safe. So they established distinctive points along major highways coming in and going out of where they did checkpoints. Where we're in New Brunswick, we have multiple different access routes and different things like that. So I think we can learn based on what BC has done. Ontario's kind of done some sort of adaptation. And then we can look at what would work for the province. I agree. There are so many different boat launches. There are so many ways that you could avoid this if you were really trying and adamant that I don't want to clean my boat. So I think that having the infrastructure is a key point because you can't enforce something if you don't have the infrastructure. But if we have the infrastructure, they've got to figure out where that enforcement power goes to, because that would be, I think, some federal capacity for enforcement as well as provincial, sorry. It's a very big beast that we have to tackle, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be difficult when you like in our area we have I think the last count we counted was 16 different fishing tournaments throughout the year. And that's a lot. And they come from everywhere for these fishing tournaments. And I'm okay with slimming that right down to one, but we'll see. But anyway, I honestly think that it boils down to even though we could learn from the shared experiences, I think that we formalize an ask and then we could take that ask. I don't know right now if I took this or if I'm just speaking for myself, but if we took this as the Economic Development Committee to the whole board of CRSC, I think they would be questions as to what is the ask that we're trying to do. And maybe that's something we ask our CEO, not our director, but our CEO, John Smith, to try to come up with some type of a formal ask.
Mr. Chair, if I could on that, I think there's one other piece that we need to do. I think we also should have DNR come in and meet with us as well and kind of give a further lay of the land from a legislative regulatory process of where we're at. I did have early on conversations after meeting with Director Corey and CAO Holly on that, and we had some conversations around that. So I think that we should have them invite them maybe even to our next meeting, if you would, regarding that, and have folks back and allow people to have their say and do like we did today, cast that net widely. It's great to see some of the other members on, and even though there's not a big crowd per se on, we do have a lot of people that do follow and view after the fact. So if if you think our numbers are low, don't worry about that. Word spreads quickly, much like invasive species. So we can get on there. Sorry, I'm trying to be a little punny there. Wake the crowd up. It's almost 5. Anyway, but we were trying to do that. And Mr. Chair, I just wanted to point out, I believe that Director Erickson had a question there earlier, or maybe it was answered. I'm not sure. No. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, I have one
Okay,
comment before we end, if I might.
yes, please.
Sure. What we will be doing here is we haven't decided what our ask will be to ourselves in our community. We're going to look at a strategy and the development of the research for best practices, what other provinces, what other municipalities are doing, look at what we're able to do, and to work collaboratively with our lake associations to come up with something that is doable for our community and helps to bring as many people on board as possible. But the anecdotal piece in this that started me really moving, I think, was that this last spring we had an email from a group that does kayak fishing. They wanted to run a tournament in Lake George because they had never run one there before. And I said, well, that's a wonderful idea because we get lots of feedback about the big boats and the noises from our small lakes when we have other tournaments. But then we worked through it. They came back to us and we said, well, maybe you should talk to the Lake Association in Lake George, see what they think. And in between all that, the issue of Eurasian milfoil raised up a lot. People, the first reaction was fear. Our lake is going to be ruined. And so when they talked to that association, they actually said, well, we don't think you should run a tournament here. We don't think we want more kayaks. Well, there are kayaks coming and going in that lake, hundreds of a month, different from everywhere. But it was the fear reaction that I was seeing out of some very strong individuals that shouldn't have had a fear reaction to it, but they were. The whole reaction was our lake is going to be lost. And Lake George is probably one of the most vulnerable lakes that we have because it's very shallow, it's flat bottom, it's close to the St. John River. There are lots of access points, and I understand why they were concerned, but fear is never the right reaction. So we're looking at a strategy. I would say at the very best, if regionally we get to a point where at least we're all doing the same education, looking at whether or not we do wash or not. But I spoke to the Oromocto Lake Association on Saturday, and I said unequivocally, when I was here last year, I talked about washing stations, and I said, you will not hear me talk about washing stations again until we have a complete strategy in front of us that includes you as volunteers doing a lot of the support work. So,
Yeah, I think that that goes to say what I've been saying about the ask is that if we as a capital region are all doing the same thing, it wouldn't matter if I was in Fredericton launching, or if I'm in Grand Lake, or in Harvey, or in Mactaquac. We would know the rules, we would understand what we're going to do, and then we could support it collectively, which would be a lot stronger than if I support it by myself. That's all I was saying.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. Is there anybody else? Greg, you seem to have a lot of things working there. I don't know. Did you have questions or?
No questions. I've got another meeting that starts at 5, and this is me juggling.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Is there anybody else? No? Oh, did James?
Keep you to 5. Just a quick question, and sorry I'm late. I'm working on the Blue Trails project for the region, so it's very prominent, important piece of this whole thing. And I missed the first of it, so correct me if you've already covered it. But do you have maps of where signage is now and what lakes don't have the milfoil and that kind of I'm thinking like a heat map kind of thing. Maybe that was covered.
We do have information on where most of our signage is. However, we've had a couple different renditions of signage and staff turnover. So I will look back and see how up to date that is, so we can give that to you. But we also have lots of signs left over from previous funding and templates if there's interest to print more.
Yeah,
And then
where I see them. Is
yeah.
there a process around how the signage happens, or is that just kind of working through partnerships and where things are identified?
So most of our signs have been produced with grant-based funding, with the objective to get it in the right places for those projects. But we do have leftovers that we're looking to get put out. And then printing of new signs, we don't have capacity to do that with our grant-based funding right now, the grants that we have, but we have the ability to work with partners to get those printed at a efficient cost, I would say. Or sharing templates with groups. We do want the signage to go out there. And then speaking to your Eurasian Water Milfoil point about maps, about distribution, we heavily rely on iNaturalist as our identification point of where those aquatic invasive species or other invasive species are. We do have it narrowed down in a form of a heat map, but I can share that with you after as well. But that's where we typically go to, especially where we're not able to monitor every single water body all the time. We do rely heavily on the citizen scientist to report things.
Yeah, and I have more specific questions I can send you an email on.
For sure.
Okay, thanks. I think just to move things along, I think our direction to staff, if everybody's approved of that, would be to ask our CEO to reach out to DNR and see if we can get them involved in the next meetings. And then we would wait from there and then try to develop our ask from that point. Does that work for everybody? Yeah, great.
Thumbs up.
Okay, well, I again want to thank you guys for taking the time to bring us up to speed and help us better understand our invasive species and what's going on. And that I'm sure if we have any questions, we could, Mayor Corey would be happy to send your contacts along, and we'll send any questions along that we would have. And we'll go from there. Is there anybody have anything final to say before we move to adjourn? Then I need a motion.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair. Greg Erickson, City of Fredericton.
Okay, second.
I'll second. Sheridan, County of Armagh.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank
Night,
you all.
everyone.
Everyone.
Very much.